Stranger Things is back, and it's the 4th season of the hit show. However, the final 2 episodes have been chopped off by Netflix for airing at a later date. Keep those subscriptions going, you rubes! In the meantime, let's take a closer look at the latest truncated season and some cool details and references. For bonus fun, take a shot every time I mention Stephen King. If you pass out on the keyboard, there's a chance you might leave a like. Spoiler warning for Season 4. The name of the first episode is The Hellfire Club. Like many episodes of Stranger Things, it's an allusion to the popular culture of the 1980s. The club first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 129 in 1980. The nefarious group is most known for tempting the powerful psychic Jean Grey to evil. The Hellfire Club in the show is the boys' ongoing Dungeons and Dragons party, which is honestly setting a pretty high standard because none of my campaigns have custom shirts. During a car ride with Robin and Steve, they talk about Robin's potential love interest with Vicky. Robin isn't sure if Vicky will return her affection. Being the 1980s, it's a risky move to admit her feelings to another woman, but Steve assures her that Vicky returns Fast Times paused at 53 minutes 5 seconds. Fast Times at Ridgemont High is a classic 80s set high school feature, and at the specified time, Phoebe Cates' character has an iconic reveal. In fact, the scene is often cited as one of the most paused moments of all time. I'll leave the meaning of that title unspoken for the sake of not angering the YouTube gods.
Boobies!
Chrissy meets a very brutal end at the climax of the first episode. She is in the home of the newly introduced Eddie, purchasing some harder drugs than the Mary Jane she got before. Earlier in the episode, she suffered from disturbing visions of her abusive mother, but those visions go to 11. Puns. When she is dispatched horrifically. The whole sequence has a lot in common with one of Stranger Things' 80s influences, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Chrissy is taken into a dream world and taunted through a twisted version of her own home. In the real world, a black-haired delinquent tries to wake her, but watches helplessly as she's thrown to the ceiling and mangled. It's incredibly similar to Tina's end in the classic horror film. New character Eddie also finds himself in the same subplot that Rod does in the Wes Craven film. He is the prime suspect in the death of the young cheerleader, and being a local well-known delinquent means a lot of the town are quick to believe it. So far, he has had much better luck evading his pursuers, but that's mostly because he's much less of a dick compared to Rod. When Robin is pining for her crush, she goes on a bit of verbal diarrhea and leans up against a large poster. Since she is working in a video store, it's a poster for a recently released film. Well, recent in the show. It's the poster for the 1985 released The Last Dragon, a Kung Fu Motown musical from musical producer Berry Gordy. It's a nice shout out to a lesser known cult film, and it was homaged heavily in another Netflix production, The Get Down. Unfortunately for that Netflix original, it didn't have Stranger Things viewing numbers. Episode 2 has a running theme, being a dirty liar and having it blow up in your face. It starts when Eleven is lying to Mike about how cool she is and how easy everything is going, and it comes to a head with a slight nod once again to Stephen King. During the roller rink party, she is dragged into the middle of the dance floor and taunted by the bullies until she is doused in a frosty chocolate milkshake. I guess they didn't get the memo not to taunt a powerful psychic girl at a party. Fortunately for them, Eleven has been recently depowered. Unfortunately for them, Eleven still knows how to break a fool. Chrissy's boyfriend goes on a bit of a rampage about the recent death of his ladylove. He blames her death on Eddie, and more specifically on the Satan-worshipping cult he leads. The cult is actually just his Dungeons and Dragons group, but Jason isn't fooled. He says that he has heard of people who lose the ability to tell reality from fantasy because of the game and hurt people. What he is actually remembering is the 1982 film Mazes and Monsters, starring a pre-famed Tom Hanks. The made-for-TV movie is about a fictionalized version of D&D that drives Hank's character insane and leads him to almost jumping off the World Trade Center. The Satanic Panic was very much a real thing at the time, and it was often focused on the tabletop role-playing game. Given D&D's massive recent explosion in pop culture, I would say the devil won. Go Satan! When Max and Dustin take over the video store computer system to find where Eddie could be hiding, they bring up a list of customers named Rick. There are a number of them, and it looks like a famous cartoon scientist is among them. One of the names is Rick Sanchez, the protagonist of Rick and Morty. The Nightmare on Elm Street references keep coming with the introduction of Victor Creel. When she visits Eddie's uncle, Nancy learns about the madman and his previous actions. Creel is later revealed to be played by Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself. Creel is not the one who attacked his family, but rather his son. Still, it's appropriate that the storied actor appears because of the influence his character had on the season 4 antagonist. There's even the continuing nods when main character Nancy is thrust into the upside-down Creel mansion. And here's an ominous and gravelly voice calling her name.
I see you've been looking for me, Nancy.
When the season's monster Vecna is revealed, his home in the Upside Down is an appropriately spooky mansion. The former home of the Creel family certainly has seen better days, in both the Dark Netherrealm and here on Earth. The look of the house has its inspirations in the homes of other horror icons. Its design shares similarities to the home of Norman Bates and his controlling mother. Psycho 3 was even released in 1986, the year Stranger Things 4 is set. Yes, I said Psycho 3 because the black and white classic had 2 sequels in the 80s, which saw the Bates home fall into disrepair. It's not the only source of inspiration for the house, however. When the gang finds the Creel house in episode 6, they entered the dilapidated home with flashlights at the ready. They must also be planning on reenacting a critical scene in Stephen King's It. Yes, this is extremely similar to the sequence in It where the Losers Club enters the home of the clown Pennywise. Both Pennywise and Vecna are beings of immense power from another realm that hunt teenagers through their trauma and fears. Vecna is the soft-spoken, skinless horror that is haunting the cast this season. And he's a pretty gross and goopy creep. He has a lot in common with another attic-dwelling creep. The monster spends his time hiding in the decrepit top of the large gothic Creel house and is collecting victims to increase his strength. This is extremely similar to the Clive Barker film Hellraiser. While the Cenobites took over as the stars of the series in later films, the first focused mostly on the evil Frank and his attempts to rebuild his body with a fresh supply of victims, much like how Vecna grows stronger with each teenager. While Vecna is reaching out from the Upside Down and finding his latest victim, he enters a trance-like state and begins to reach out to potential targets. This sequence is incredibly similar to how Cerebro is depicted in the Bryan Singer X-Men films. It's another X-Men reference this season, next to the Hellfire Club and Dustin and Max's own personal Cerebro, which is just a police scanner and CB radio. Season 4 is filled with references and inspirations taken from the tale of an ill-fated family and their Long Island home. The biggest one is in the tragic story of the Creel family. When Robin and Nancy manage to bluff and scam their way into a meeting with the supposedly insane father, they learn the details of how he survived his encounter with Vecna. Details are taken from both events surrounding the Long Island home. First is the real-life crimes of Ronald DeFeo Jr. against his own family, the details of which shocked the nation. There was little supernatural about the crime's methods, but DeFeo claimed insanity and said he heard voices plotting against him. We later learn the other side from Henry Creel, aka One, aka Vecna. He also says he heard into his family's minds and saw that they were not innocent. Like his real-life counterpart, he also took things to a lethal conclusion. The other connection is to the horror itself and the experiences of the Lutz family. In 1975, they moved into the old DeFeo house and a short while later fled in terror. They reported hearing strange sounds and disturbances in the night. Victor Creel talks about the same experiences, from the mutilated animals to the dark visions. The Amityville Horror is a hugely influential book and later film. Since its release, it's influenced countless horror films and series. There has also been a litany of Amity blank films that continue to this year's Amity Uprising, which features zombies somehow. Watergate is an unexpected point of reference this season, with both an early reference and then a callback later in the series. It first comes up when the groups are breaking into the school's counselor office to steal her records on Vecna's previous victims. Later, when they find the gate to the Upside Down under the lake, they give it the moniker Watergate. It's enough to elicit a chuckle from several parties, including me. Back to when Robin and Nancy lie their way into a meeting with Victor Creel. As they are led down past cell after cell of insane convicts, they are told the strict rules for interacting with the prisoner. It's a speech that's almost taken verbatim from the classic Silence of the Lambs. The whole scene is a pretty close recreation of when Agent Clarice Starling meets the infamous cannibal Dr. Lecter. Creel ends up being far less dangerous than Hannibal, but his revelations are no less helpful when it comes to saving Max from Vecna's curse. While the hospital's security is top-notch, it looks about as good at helping people as Arkham Asylum. When Max is under threat from Vecna and his eye-popping ways, she slips into a vision or trance of the Upside Down. When she approaches the spooky home, there is a prominent grave out front. The headstone reads, Myers, like the lead slasher in the classic Halloween series. It looks like Vecna managed to do what both Donald Pleasance and Rob Zombie couldn't: bury the Shatner-faced maniac once and for all. Tammy Thompson returns to deliver a pitchy version of the Star-Spangled Banner. Tammy previously appeared in the past season, and since leaving high school it looks like her singing career took off. Her outfit is a reference to Madonna and her 1984 VMA Awards outfit. It's an iconic dress, and it's a fun detail that it's already 2 years out of date on the fashion side. She's probably not going to end up like Madonna because of being too pitchy. When Eleven arrives at the location of the top-secret Project Nina, she finds it looking a little unassuming. It's a single shed sitting out in the middle of a vast stretch of American desert. To her surprise, the utility shed is actually an elevator that leads to a massive underground base. This is just like the wildfire facility in the seminal Michael Crichton work, The Andromeda Strain. In both the book and the 1971 film, the entrance to the top-secret wildfire facility is also hidden in a storage closet. Stranger Things has taken some inspiration from the Andromeda Strain before, including Season 1's white suits. The Duffer Brothers cited a more recent movie as inspiration this season. One film in particular is the Seth Rogen stoner comedy Pineapple Express. The character of Argyle was directly inspired by Franco's role, and it's never more apparent than when the shit hits the fan and he is forced to make a quick getaway. By the way, quick shout out to unknown agent Hero Man, who is an absolute beast when everything went down. 2 later episodes are directed by Hungarian filmmaker Nimrod Antal. Before Stranger Things, Antal was known for the 2010s Predator sequel that wasn't a massive disappointment. Shane Black may have written Lethal Weapon, but he lost out on making a better Predator movie to a guy named Nimrod. This season, and the Predators have a common plot revolving around a group of dangerous criminals and ne'er-do-wells who are forced to fight an alien monster for sport. The connection to Winona Ryder is also fun, as the actress was in the 4th Alien film Resurrection. It's almost an Alien vs. Predator matchup, but better than any of those were. In the climax of episode 7, we learn the dark origins of Vecna. He was number 1 and the source of the powers that now inhabit 11. During this revelation, a bombastic and ethereal score begins to play throughout. This song is actually Pruitt-Igoe and Prophecies from the Philip Glass Ensemble. It was originally created as part of the experimental film Koyaanisqatsi. The name itself means life out of balance, which is a fitting way to describe the effect One and the Upside Down has had in Hawkins. A more direct connection comes from Zack Snyder and his 3-hour-long superhero epic. No, not that one. The good one. Yes, One's transformation into Vecna mirrors Doc Manhattan's transformation in the adaptation of the Alan Moore masterpiece. Both men are destroyed and then reborn into something tremendously powerful. At least Doc Manhattan got to keep his junk.
Stranger Things 4 Part 2 was a blast to get through, but I wouldn't blame you if you were so entrenched in the story that you missed a few things here and there. Hey, it's Patrice with Screen Rant, and here's 15 details you might have missed in those last 2 episodes. The Wheeler family is full of loving and caring faces, including Nancy, Mike, Holly, Karen, and Ted. Actually, let's rewind that. everybody in the family seems to care for one another like a normal family should, except for their father, Ted Wheeler. I'm sure you've noticed throughout the show, Ted has been the most lackadaisical of the family when it comes to the strange events occurring in Hawkins, to the point where it seems like he doesn't care at all. In fact, since season 1, Ted hasn't really been the most present father to his wife and kids. And it seems like Nancy nor Vecna is oblivious to his bad parenting, because when Vecna shows her disturbing visions of her family being taken out by the monsters of the Upside Down, she recalls all her family members but her dad. Yeah, even Vecna knew that man wasn't getting a #1 dad mug anytime soon. I mean, my guy voted for Reagan, so he couldn't be that good of a person anyway. That joke will probably spell the end of me in the comments. Speaking of the end of things, Hawkins is pretty much done for, as we are shown in the finale of this season. Despite everyone's best efforts in preventing Vecna from achieving his goal, Max's heart stopping for a full minute happened to be just enough time for him to open a gate between our dimension and the Upside Down, just like he showed Nancy in her visions. And hopefully everything else she saw doesn't come to fruition. Although we don't know how these sacrifices connect our world to the Upside Down just yet, because they seem to be a substitute for Eleven's ability to open gates herself, it seems that when the gate is opened in the town of Hawkins, it forms the shape of a giant X or cross. Most of us may have been too teary-eyed or in a state of shock after what happened to both Eddie and Max to also notice when the gate was forming, each end of that X happened to be where each sacrifice passed away. It starts off opening where Max is, then shows the road where the kid from the Hawkins newspaper passed, then the trailer for Chrissy, and finally the lake where the basketball player met his end. Hopefully in season 5 we learn more about why Vecna needed 4 sacrifices to make a giant X, and how exactly each of their passings enabled a connection to be made between our world and the Upside Down. Stranger Things wouldn't be Stranger Things without all the 80s film references it made throughout its run so far. Volume 2 of Part 4 was no different, and we found a handful that you guys might not have caught. Starting off with a couple of nods to one of the most famous horror novelists of all time, Stephen King. While Lucas is supporting an unconscious Max in the hospital, he reads her an excerpt from King's novel The Talesman. The section that he reads in particular is when a character opens their eyes, mirroring Lucas's hopes for Max to awaken from her coma. The Duffer Brothers are also working with Stephen King to bring an adaptation of the book to Netflix, though the project is still in its early stages. Additionally, The Talesman also includes both earthquakes and portals to other dimensions, which mirrors the events of this season. Another King reference is made when Max reaches into her mind for a happy moment to escape Vecna, that moment being the snowball dance from season 2. Even though this is a memory that Max seems to find peace with, Vecna still finds his way to her and goes on to ruin the moment with imagery similar to that of Stephen King's Carrie. In the 1976 adaptation of the book, the famous prom scene is very similar, with lots of red tainting the very blue atmosphere, and a girl who freaks out and uses telekinetic powers similar to that of Eleven. Stephen King continues to be one of the greatest sources of inspiration for the Duffer Brothers, so it's fitting that they pay homage to the writer whenever they can. The Duffer Brothers are also known for styling many of their characters after popular icons of the 80s. Again, volume 2 of part 4 is no different. During the scene in which Team Nancy starts preparing for their battle with Vecna by going to the weapons store, Robin and Steve coincidentally spot Robin's crush, Vicky. Though to their disappointment, it seems she has a boyfriend. During the scene, we can see that Vicky's outfit is styled completely after Molly Ringwald, and her character, Samantha Baker, the protagonist from the 1984 film 16 Candles. Everything from the skirt down to the hairstyle is modeled after the character. Fortunately, Robin can learn more about her style, because in the finale it turns out Vicky is most likely bisexual. The happy ending we wanted for both of them. But before the gang could even approach that weapons store, it was important to remember that the whole town was basically on a witch hunt for poor Eddie. In order to avoid our boy getting spotted and probably taken out by the basketball team specifically, Max gives him a Michael Myers mask. While you probably didn't miss this reference to the classic horror film Halloween, because I mean, how do you miss Michael Myers? I know you all have eyes. What you may have wondered was, where did they even get the mask? Its appearance wasn't out of nowhere, as the decision to use the disguise comes from Max, who showed she owned the mask back in season 2 while the kids were out trick-or-treating. That's not the only Halloween reference in these last 2 episodes though. The final showdown between Vecna and Team Nancy features the trio setting him on fire, then Nancy shooting him with a sawed-off shotgun until he falls out of a window and disappears. This finisher is a reference to how Michael Myers was taken out in the original Halloween film. Though Myers wasn't set on fire and was taken out with a pistol instead of a shotgun, everything from being shot multiple times to falling out of a window and disappearing was remade during Vecna's defeat, and just like Michael Myers, Vecna will be back. Alien Resurrection also gets a quick nod in Volume 2. During the scene where Hopper discovers the lab of multiple Demogorgons in the Russian prison, we see each of the Demogorgons being locked up in tubes while being submerged in green liquid. This lab and tubing look eerily similar to the one shown in Alien Resurrection, and while the film isn't from the 80s like most other references in Stranger Things, it does star Winona Ryder, and since she's also in those Russian scenes, it's most likely a nod to her role. When Enzo gets Yuri to finally stop playing around, he gets to him by referencing a Russian conflict Yuri took part in. The conflict Enzo was referring to was the very real 7 months clash between China and the Soviet Union at Damansky. While this conflict was a very real part of our history, the Stranger Things universe makes Yuri a well-known hero from the clash. There are also a bunch of tiny details that were thrown into the backgrounds of scenes or were just not the core focus. Here's a quick rapid fire of just a few things that I found. The logo of the weapon store happens to be the exact same style as the Top Gun logo. In the Russian surveillance room, there's a not so appropriate drawing of a male private part on the wall. Yeah, real mature guys. There's a Garfield mug in Eddie's trailer because Garfield references should always get some shine, and Hopper and Joyce are wearing Hulk Hogan t-shirts. There are also a couple famous movie lines that get quoted in Volume 2, one being the famous Star Wars gag, "I've got a bad feeling about this," which has been said in almost every movie, being echoed by Murray during the drive back to the Russian prison.
I don't know. I have a bad feeling about this.
I don't know, Jim. I got a bad feeling about this.
And the other quoted line being from Pulp Fiction when Robin says,
I don't believe in a higher power or divine intervention. That was a miracle.
referencing Samuel Jackson's line in the film.
You know what divine intervention is? What just happened here was a miracle.
In episode 8, we get a conclusion to the story of Eleven and Dr. Brenner as the Doctor meets his tragic fate when trying to escape the military. What was straight up bitter was that before the military even attacked, Brenner handcuffed Dr. Owens to a pole, stopping him from making an escape. And when the military confronted Owens, they weren't kind enough to help him out either. As a result, the storyline concluded with Owens being handcuffed to that pole, and with all his colleagues being taken out by the military as well, we're all left wondering about the fate of Dr. Owens. Yet another thing season 5 has to give us answers for. The Dirty Dozen film series gets referenced by Murray when he challenges Hopper's decision to go back into the Soviet prison.
This is Dirty Dozen stuff, except there are 4 of us.
3.
Which, I agreed, did not seem like a very smart idea. But if you're not familiar, the Dirty Dozen in the films is a group of 12 convicted unalivers trained and led by a US Army major with the mission to take out a bunch of German officers during World War II. So Murray actually raised a good point when he said that they weren't as prepared as them. In the epic fight between Hopper and a Demogorgon, he uses a sword to slice the creature up in one of the coolest final fights of the series. The sword that Hopper picks up is very similar to the Dungeons and Dragons Sword of Cass. In the game, the Sword of Cass is a sentient longsword that was once wielded by Cass the Bloody-Handed when rebelling against Vecna. So it's fitting that Hopper got to use it to fight off a Demogorgon and badly handicap the Stranger Things version of Vecna in the process. Now, this has been everywhere on social media, and it's most likely that you may have caught this, but after talking to a couple friends who somehow didn't catch on, I thought I'd add it into the list because maybe it wasn't as obvious as I thought. What I'm alluding to now is Will's sexuality. It's been hinted at throughout the show, but it seems that this season his feelings have reached a climax with him breaking down in the back of a car when talking to Mike, and having a conversation where his brother tells him he'll accept him no matter what. While it still isn't blatantly stated, it is heavily implied that Will is definitely not straight, and we can only hope that season 5 brings his character arc full circle, having Will come to terms with his sexuality and coming out to his friends and family, if he wants to, of course. Last but not least, Jason's well-deserved fate being split in half with the opening of the Upside Down Gate was foreshadowed earlier in the season. When Lucas has his first hangover, Jason says,
First hangover feels like you're gonna split in two. You'll live.
And the Duffer Brothers took that split in two feeling just a bit too literally, as his final moment showed his upper body being separated from his lower. And all of this could have been avoided if he just minded his own business and left Lucas and Max alone. I'd even argue that Max would have been okay if Jason hadn't intervened because he broke the cassette player, leaving her with no way to escape Vecna's wrath. So yeah, Bye bye Jason, you won't be missed. But I'm sure that Jason's fate mirrors the split hearts most of us are suffering from after that very emotional finale. Eddie was such a cool character and he should have gotten the chance to fix his reputation. And Max?
Stranger Things Season 4 is the gift that keeps on giving, and it seems like every time we rewatch an episode, we catch some more hidden details. That's why we wanted to take a look at all the little details, references, and Easter eggs that only the die-hard fans caught. So, let's take a look. And yes, there will be Stranger Things Season 4 spoilers in this video. One of the most touching and heartwarming Easter eggs comes in poster form, with Max having a poster for the surfing documentary The Endless Summer. Not only is it a callback to Max's California roots...
You miss it?
What?
The ocean. The waves. California?
But it also is a touching tribute to her brother Billy, who is a big surfer. This is one of the early signs that Max is still grieving about the loss of her brother, something which really comes into play later on in the season, and the whole running up the hill scene, which, FYI, has led to that song going up to #1 in the charts for the first time ever. And we all go through some awkward hair phases as we grow up. I mean, look at every haircut in Goblet of Fire. And the Stranger Things kids are no different, with them all rocking some new looks. Take, for example, the new longer locks that Mike is sporting, which he has clearly grown out to match his new role model, Eddie Munson.
I'm 11, you long-haired freak.
Speaking of hairstyles, I was thinking that 11 is starting to look more and more like Winona Ryder this season, and the internet seems to agree with me, with multiple fans pointing out that 11's new hairstyle looks a lot like Joyce's. Another little nod to Joyce comes with the Reebok shoebox that 11 uses as a replica for the cabin her and Hopper lived in, with Joyce famously wearing Reeboks throughout the show. But back on the subject of hairstyles, new character Chrissy Cunningham's hair design was inspired by Olivia Newton-John's character Sandy in Grease. Running Up the Hill may be one of the most notable songs referenced in Season 4, but there are a bunch of other tracks that play some secret significance. In particular, the song titles that can be seen in the background at Penhurst. As Nancy and Robin are shown the listening room, songs such as Moonlight Serenade and Red Sails in the Sunset can be seen on the chalkboard. All of these songs have to do with dreams, which is consistent with the theme of nightmares and their link to Vecna in the latest season. It's safe to say that Will has gone through some tough times recently, like being kidnapped and entrapped in the Upside Down, and it seems like the kid can't catch a break, as apparently no one seems to remember his birthday. How do we know this? Well, in the scene where Angela and her friends torture 11 at the roller rink, you'll notice that the video recording says it's March 22nd, 1986. In Season 2, Joyce asks Will if he remembers that the 22nd of March is his birthday. But I guess she should really be asking his friends and herself, as they all seem to have totally forgotten. And that's because the Duffer Brothers admitted they forgot themselves, with Matt Duffer saying, "The honest response is, clearly like the characters in the show, we also forgot about Will's birthday." So now the debate is whether we adjust Will's birthday or we just let it be really sad. My vote is sad. In the past, we've had a field day with Pixar and them making references to the people who work on their movies. But they're not the only ones to do it, and in fact, Stranger Things did the same thing in Season 4. In the scene where Max is looking through the student files in the guidance counselor's office, you can see the names John Bonacourse and Ray Brown before Max gets to Chrissy's file. Both John and Ray work on Stranger Things as the second assistant director and key grip, respectively. Now, you may have picked up that the Hellfire Club name is a nod to the X-Men's Hellfire Club, who were a key factor in Jean Grey's Dark Phoenix story, all of which works thematically considering how often Stranger Things has flirted with those elements in 11's story. But did you catch the other Easter egg in there? All the way back in Season 1, Will ends up winning Dustin's X-Men issue number 134 from 1963 after their bike race. That issue just so happens to follow the X-Men as they go up against the Hellfire Club. So the reveal at the end of Season 4 Part 1 that Henry Creel was actually Vecna was a pretty shocking moment, but there was a piece of subtle foreshadowing that we totally missed. When Vecna is first introduced in the D&D campaign, it is stated that everyone thought that he was dead, just like Henry Creel, who everyone thought was killed by his own father, Victor. For the 8th entry in this video, it's only fitting that we use it to honor the one and only Kobe Bryant, who despite famously wearing the number 24 jersey, also wore the number 8, with both numbers being retired by the Lakers. In Stranger Things, Lucas has the number 8 on his jersey, and that's because Caleb McLaughlin, who is a huge Kobe fan, had the idea to pay tribute to the basketball legend in this way. Now, the Rainbow Room in Stranger Things is a lot more depressing than the name suggests, but did you notice the small attention to detail in the background? Because I didn't, but Reddit user DJM Takamine did. The piece of detail in question is the wall with the two-way mirror that has indigo on top, while the wall with the double doors has red on top, which is likely a reference to the Upside Down and the dual realms. Now, if there's one thing that Stranger Things likes to do, it's speculate, and one of the topics that's often bandied around is Will's sexuality, with many fans believing that Will is secretly gay. A piece of evidence being used to support this theory is the fact that Will chose famous mathematician and codebreaker Alan Turing as his hero. Turing was famously gay and was actually charged for homosexual activity, with him only just being pardoned posthumously in 2013. Now, this next one is admittedly pretty heartwarming. In the scene where Mike goes upstairs to deliver Eleven her Eggos, you'll notice that Eleven keeps her bedroom door cracked open 3 inches. This is a reference to the recurring joke and Hopper's letter where he tells her to keep the door open 3 inches every time she has Mike in her room. Someone must be cutting onions in here because my eyes are watering. Speaking of the relationship between Eleven and Mike, did anyone notice the ring that Eleven wears throughout Season 4? That ring was actually a gift given to her by Mike in between Seasons 3 and 4, showing just how important Mike is to her. Going back to Season 1 callbacks, in Season 4, Eleven lies to Mike that she has friends and hides the fact that Angela and her friends bully her. This is mirrored with a scene from Season 1, where Mike lies about being tripped up by mouth breather Trey as he didn't want Eleven to think that he was a loser, and Eleven tells him that she understands. And still on Season 1 callbacks, as Robin goes through the items in Nancy's room, she brings attention to her ballerina jewelry box. Back in Season 1, while Eleven was exploring the Wheeler house, she also focused on the ballerina jewelry box. Also in Nancy's room in both Season 1 and Season 4 was a poster of Tom Cruise because, let's face it, that guy never gets old. And sort of still on the Season 1 callbacks, in Season 4 there's a scene where Eleven crumples a Coke can with her powers, just like she did in Season 1. However, the main Easter egg here is that the can says Classic Coke, which is a reference to the Season 3 joke about New Coke, which in itself is a reference to that time in 1985 when Coca-Cola tried a new Coke formula and then changed it back to the Classic Coke one. Still on the Season 1 references, as there's a bunch of them apparently, as we mentioned, Robin and Nancy go to Penhurst Asylum to visit Victor Creel. But this isn't the first time that Penhurst is actually referenced in Stranger Things, with it initially being brought up all the way back in Season 1, when Mike, Dustin, and Lucas first find Eleven after Will's disappearance. But fans of haunted places out there may actually know that Penhurst is in fact a real and now former asylum located in eastern Pennsylvania, which closed in 1989 due to a string of controversies. Now, the place is open as a haunted attraction where you can go hunting for ghosts. Now, I tried to keep this video light on the movie references as we've actually covered this topic already on this channel, but the parallels between Season 4 and A Nightmare on Elm Street is almost impossible to ignore. Not only is the idea of a demented creature torturing teenagers through dreams straight out of Elm Street, or some of the cinematic sequences almost shot for shot, but they even brought in Freddy Krueger actor Robert Englund in as Victor Creel. But the additional Easter egg in this scene, though, is the moment where Creel starts scratching the table with his fingernails, which is a nod to the razor-sharp blades that are attached to Freddy Krueger's fingers. Admittedly another movie reference, but in the scene where Max is brought into Vecna's world, viewers can see a tombstone, which you may be forgiven for thinking says Byers, like Joyce and Will's last name. In actuality, it says Myers, a reference to the famous on-screen serial killer Michael Myers from the Halloween movie series, who Max actually ended up dressing up as for Halloween back in Season 2. Another pop culture reference comes in the scene where Jonathan tells Will and Mike about his plan to leave their house and go back to Hawkins, and refers to the two officers watching them as Ponch and John. This is, of course, a nod to Officer Jonathan Andrew Baker and Officer Francis Ponch Poncherello from the TV series Chips, which ran from 1977 to 1983. One of the biggest movies from the 80s has to be the one and only Goonies, and seeing as Stranger Things is all about 80s pop culture references, you can bet your bottom dollar that they made a shout out to the movie in Season 4. In the scene where Lucas and Max explore Victor Creel's old house, Lucas makes a joke about if he plays the piano correctly, a secret door might open.
Voila.
This is, of course, a reference to the Goonies, where Andy has to play a piano perfectly in order for the crew to find One-Eyed Willie's treasure.
I piggybacked from a pizza dough freezer.
What did you say?
Yep, that did it. Stranger Things 4 is officially my favorite season of the series. I was holding off until we got to see these last 2 episodes to make sure the Duffer Brothers stuck the landing, and let me tell y'all, that was a superhero landing. Hey, it's Patrice with Screen Rant, and let's go over the thrilling conclusion of Stranger Things 4 Part 2. Starting off with that final showdown in which all the plot threads of the season come together, we get Lucas versus Jason, Team Dustin and Eddie versus the Demobats, the Russia team versus a bunch of Demodogs and Demogorgons, Team Nancy versus Physical Vecna, and 11 and Max versus Mental Vecna. All of these battles were super intense, but more importantly is that most of them had very important character moments that further developed our main cast this season. Lucas realized that he didn't need to be popular and that he found fulfillment with the friends that he had, also that he was looking up to a straight up psychopath. Eddie went from being someone who only really thought of himself, his own well-being, and running away from confrontation to holding off the Demobats for the sake of his new group of friends, and finally graduating in a moral sense. Way to go, Eddie. It was indeed your year, my man. Max came to terms with the negative thoughts she had surrounding herself and her brother, which Vecna still uses against her in the most twisted way possible. Joyce learned from Bob's passing and saved Jim from being devoured by a Demodog, and Yuri has a small moment of growth, going from a trickster back to a man of integrity, which is great because he was getting very annoying very fast. And although she didn't succeed in convincing Vecna, 11 realized that neither she nor Vecna were monsters, just products of their environments and the pain inflicted upon them by Dr. Brenner. Unfortunately, even with all the character growth we saw in those final fights, the showdown had a bittersweet ending with Eddie not making it, Max going into a non-responsive coma, and Vecna's plan succeeding with a gigantic door to the Upside Down, damaging a huge part of the town of Hawkins, which by the way has been Vecna's plan since before the show began. After being sent to the realm of the Upside Down, the final episode of this season revealed that Vecna used his powers to control and form some kind of symbiotic relationship with the Mind Flayer hive mind particles. Because of Vecna's affinity for spiders being predators, he turned those particles into the menacing spider-like shape we know the Mind Flayer as today. Vecna also revealed that all this time he was trying to contact 11 because she's the only one who's able to open a portal connecting the Upside Down to the real world. So 11 was essentially the key for Vecna to execute his plan. That is, until he decided to open a portal on his own by finding 4 sacrifices. How these sacrifices create an opening is still unknown, but it probably has something to do with the fact that the opening in Hawkins is a cross, one end for each victim. But Max ended up in a coma. So how did Vecna win? Well, even though Max ended up living, her heart did stop for a full minute, technically making her the 4th victim. But it's implied that 11 channeling her happy memories saved Max from passing on completely. Sadly, it seems like Dr. Brenner's warning that 11 wasn't strong enough has gotten to her, as we learn that she feels responsible for the results of the battle. When she tries to go into Max's mind, we can clearly see that she's extremely troubled by the fact that she's finding nothing. 11 isn't giving up though. She's actively trying to help Max, as seen when she attempts to recreate the memory of their spin the bottle game. Moving on, the Upside Down is now coming to Hawkins, complete with its creatures, snow, and beautiful red storms. Although the townsfolk either believe that the gateway is just damage caused from a massive earthquake or the result of Eddie Munson's cult rituals, the reality is that Max's heart stopped long enough to connect our realm with the realm of the Upside Down. Will also reveals that Vecna is indeed still alive, but very hurt. And I mean, it was obvious, the whole body disappeared. Y'all think we were just gonna believe it spontaneously combusted? The future of Hawkins and the world is left ambiguous for now, but we can safely assume that if things are left as they are, all the demo creatures will wreak havoc, plant life will continue to decay, and Vecna will fully succeed. There are still a ton of secrets about the Upside Down that need to be answered. One being, why is the Upside Down stuck on November 6, 1983? Also, how exactly do the victims of Vecna create a portal between the 2 dimensions? And where did the Upside Down ultimately come from? I suppose that one might be left unanswered because that's like asking where our universe came from, and I should probably stop that conversation there before the comments go wild with theories about the beginning of everything. Also, I've seen people thinking that 11 was the creator of the Upside Down. This is not true. 11 only created the first portal to the dimension, not the dimension itself. With season 5 confirmed to be the final season of Stranger Things, I'm sure all these questions and more will finally have answers. There were really some top tier character and world building moments in Stranger Things 4, so 5 definitely has its work cut out for it as far as expectations go. What did you all think of season 4, and where would you all rank it in comparison to the rest of the series? And are you excited to see Netflix's flagship series finally come to a close soon? Let us know in the comments. That's all I got for you guys this time. I'm gonna go join Max in that coma. Wake me up when season 5 is out, y'all.